There is a single Greek verb at the center of this story, and almost every English Bible printed in the last 400 years has handled it badly. 2 words. Me. Haptu. Spoken by a man who, a few hours earlier, had been a corpse. Spoken to a woman who had watched him die. The phrase appears in John chapter 20, verse 17. The King James Version rendered it, "Touch me not." The Latin tradition before it carved the same idea into stone and oil paint as Noli me tangere, a phrase that became the title of paintings by Titian, Correggio, Holbein, and dozens of medieval altarpieces. Mary kneeling, Jesus pulling away, a frozen gesture of refusal. That is the picture most people carry in their heads when they hear this scene described, but the Greek does not say that. It does not say it at all. Haptomai is the verb. In its base sense, it means to fasten oneself to something, to take hold, to grip. The simple act of touching something briefly is usually expressed with a different word in Greek, sallo or thingiano, or even the milder forms of haptomai used elsewhere. When haptomai appears in this present tense imperative form with the negative particle me in front of it, Greek grammar is doing something specific. It is not forbidding an action that has yet to begin. It is interrupting an action already in progress. Stop clinging. Stop holding on. Let go. That is what the verb actually does on the page. The difference matters more than it might first appear. A command not to touch creates a wall. A command to stop clinging assumes the embrace has already happened, that arms are already wrapped around shoulders, that a face is pressed against a chest. The first reading makes Jesus seem distant, almost cold, holding his follower at arm's length on the morning of his greatest victory. The second reading does the opposite. It places her inside his arms and asks her gently to loosen her grip, not because the touch is wrong, because she's trying to keep him in a form he is no longer going to wear. The whole chapter turns on that distinction. There is something else worth noticing here at the very start. A few verses later, in the same chapter, the same Jesus walks into a locked room and says to a man named Thomas, "Put your finger here, see my hands, reach out your hand and put it into my side." The contrast is sharp enough to hurt. The devoted woman who has loved him through everything is told to let go. This skeptical disciple who has refused to believe is invited to push his fingers into an open wound. Centuries of preachers have tried to harmonize that contrast, and many of them have done it clumsily, as if Jesus were rewarding doubt and rebuking love. He is not. The two scenes are not parallel. They are answering two different human conditions with two different gestures. Mary is being asked to step forward into something. Thomas is being given a foothold to step forward at all. One needs to release. The other needs to grasp. The morning is doing this on purpose. Before going any further, it is worth admitting how easy it is to read this passage quickly. Resurrection, tomb, Mary, recognition. We know the beats, we have heard them in sermons, in films, in Easter pageants. The familiarity flattens the strangeness of what is actually being described. A man whose body has been wrapped in burial linens and laid behind a sealed stone is standing upright in a garden at dawn, and he is asking the woman who came to anoint his corpse to please stop holding him so tightly. That is a very strange sentence. It deserves a slower reading than it usually gets. The early Greek-speaking commentators, figures like Cyril of Alexandria in the 5th century, John Chrysostom, a generation earlier, heard the verb the way native speakers would have. They did not write about a forbidden touch. They wrote about a kind of holding that had to be released. Cyril used the image of a hand closing around something precious that had to be let go before it could become something even more precious. Chrysostom compared it to a person trying to hold water in a fist. The harder the grip, the less remained. Latin readers a century or two later did not have the same instinct. The Latin verb tangere covers a wider range, from a fingertips brush to a firm grip, and Jerome's translation of noli me tangere allowed Western Christianity to read the scene as a refusal of contact rather than an invitation to a different kind of contact. The mistranslation was not malicious. It was cultural, but it shaped Western art and devotion for more than 1,000 years. This first chapter is, in some ways, only set up. The verb is the door. to walk through it requires going back into the morning itself, into the darkness Mary was walking through when she came to find a body, into what she had loved and lost and what she did not yet understand. The text rewards patience. It rewards the kind of slow reading that asks each word to mean what it means, not what tradition has trained it to mean. So that is the door. Mayhap to. Stop clinging. The grammar is not subtle once you see it. The task is to see why he asks her this, and what is at stake in her loosening her grip, and what it costs her, and what it gives her in return. The rest of the story lives inside that question. Chapter 2. A woman walking in the dark. She left for the tomb before sunrise. The Gospel of John uses one specific Greek word for the moment she set out: skosia, darkness. Not the soft pre-dawn blue of a poet's morning, the deep pre-light dark of a world before anything has begun. It is the same word John used at the very opening of his Gospel. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. He chooses his vocabulary carefully. When he says skotia, he means it. To understand why Mary is walking through the dark with a small basket of spices, you have to know what a Jewish burial in 1st century Judea actually looked like. The body had been hurriedly placed in the tomb on Friday evening because the Sabbath was about to begin and Jewish law forbade the necessary work. Spices, oils, the careful binding of linen, all of that had to wait. So the women who loved him waited too. They waited through the Sabbath, which would have felt longer than any Sabbath of their lives. And as soon as the first hint of the mission came, before the sky itself was ready, Mary was on the road. The other synoptic Gospels mention several women going together. John names only one. This is a deliberate narrative choice. By placing Mary alone at the tomb, John is doing what he often does, narrowing the camera onto a single soul, so that the reader feels what that soul feels. The earlier crowd of women is not erased, it is simply moved off stage. Mary stands in for all of them, and she also stands as herself. Who was she? Western popular culture has spent centuries confusing this. A medieval pope conflated her with the unnamed sinful woman of Luke chapter 7, the one who washed Jesus' feet with her tears. The conflation became so widespread that for over 1,000 years the word Magdalene carried the implication of repentant prostitute, a meaning the biblical text never assigns. The Roman Catholic Church formally separated the figures in 1969, but the cultural residue is still everywhere. In films, novels, paintings, even in the English word Magdalene, which derives from her medieval name. The actual Mary of Magdala is described very differently in the Gospels. She came from Magdala, a fishing town on the western shore of the Sea of Galilee, archaeologically excavated in recent decades, and known to have been a relatively prosperous community. Luke chapter 8 describes her as a woman from whom 7 demons had been driven out, and immediately afterwards lists her among a group of women who were supporting Jesus and the disciples financially out of their own resources. That is a significant social detail. Women of independent means were not common in 1st century Galilee. Mary had her own resources, and she spent them on this man and his movement. The 7 demons matter too, whatever that phrase referred to in its original setting. Possession, illness, profound psychological suffering, all of those have been argued. It indicates that Jesus had reached into a darkness inside her and pulled her out of it. 7, in Hebrew thinking, is the number of completion. 7 demons is not 7 separate problems, it is total bondage. And total bondage, removed by him, becomes total devotion. This is the woman walking through the scotia toward the tomb. She is not coming with hope. The text is honest about that. She is coming with spices, which means she is coming to finish a burial. There is no resurrection in her mind. She is not testing a prophecy. She is not waiting to see if something might happen. She is doing what women in her culture had done for centuries, caring for a body, anointing it, completing the rituals that turn a corpse into a properly honored memory. When she sees the stone rolled away, her first thought is grimly reasonable. Tomb robbery was a real and common crime in the 1st century Roman world. The Emperor Claudius issued an edict, sometimes dated to around AD 41, and surviving in an inscription found at Nazareth, threatening capital punishment for anyone disturbing graves. The fact that such an edict existed at all is evidence of how widespread the problem was. Mary, seeing the open tomb, assumes the worst. They have taken him. She does not know where they have laid him. She runs. She finds Peter and the other disciple, almost certainly John himself, though the text leaves him unnamed in characteristic Johannine modesty. The two men race back to the tomb. The younger one, faster, arrives first but waits at the entrance. Peter, less reverent or less hesitant or simply more impulsive, walks straight in. They see the linen wrappings lying flat. They see the cloth that had been around his head folded separately. The narrative detail is almost forensic. Whoever had been in that tomb had not been hauled away by thieves. Thieves do not unwrap bodies and fold cloths. John writes a small, careful sentence about himself at this moment. He saw and he believed, but then John adds, with that same careful honesty, that the disciples did not yet understand the scripture, that he had to rise from the dead. They believed something. They did not yet know what. They went home, and Mary stayed. This is the moment the camera narrows again. The men leave. The first witnesses have come and gone. The historical, public, official version of the scene has been recorded. Two named male disciples have inspected the evidence and departed. And then, alone in the garden, the woman who has nowhere else to go remains beside the empty space. She bends to look in. She sees what they had not seen. Two angels in white, sitting where the body had been, one at the head and one at the feet. The image is loaded. In the Holy of Holies in the Jerusalem temple, the Ark of the Covenant was topped by two cherubim of gold, one at each end of the mercy seat, the place where atonement was made. The empty space between them, traditionally, was the throne of God's invisible presence. Mary looks into the tomb and sees, in spatial form, the mercy seat. The body is gone. The atonement is complete. The space between the angels is full of an absence that is also a declaration. She does not see this. She is weeping. The angels speak to her gently, asking why. She gives the same answer she gave Peter and John. They have taken away my Lord, and I do not know where they have laid him. The repetition is significant. It is the third time in the chapter she has said something close to this. Grief makes a circle. It does not move forward easily. And then, behind her, a voice. She turns. There is a man there. The text is careful about this too. It says she did not know that it was Jesus. The Greek phrase implies more than poor lighting. The other resurrection narratives, Luke's Road to Emmaus, for example, share this same strange feature. The risen one is not always immediately recognizable. Something has changed in him, and something would have to change in her before recognition could happen. She thinks he is the gardener. That detail has been treated as accidental for centuries, a small touch of realism. But John does not write accidents. He writes signs. The garden, the gardener, the woman, the dawn. Anyone who knew the Hebrew scriptures would have heard a chord struck. The first man in the first garden, given the work of tending it. The first woman, walking with him in the cool of the day. A serpent, a loss. A long, long history of grief that began with two people losing each other in a garden at the wrong hour. And now, in another garden at the right hour, a woman is asking a gardener where her Lord has been laid. The text is doing something underneath its surface. It is gathering up the oldest grief in the human story and bringing it to a single moment. He says one word, Mariam, the Aramaic form of her name, the way her mother would have called her in from the courtyard at evening. The way her friends would have used it in the marketplace at Magdala. Not the Greek form, not the formal address, not woman, as he had called her 2 sentences earlier when he was still anonymous to her. The actual name, in the actual language of her childhood. That is when she turns. Again, the text uses 2 different words for her turning in this scene, and the second one, epistrepho, carries inside it the meaning of conversion, of turning around in a deeper sense than a body rotating on its axis. She turns the way a soul turns. She turns toward what she had lost and finds it standing in front of her, calling her by the name she has answered to all her life. Rabboni, she says. It is Aramaic, not Greek. John translates it for his Greek-speaking readers, teacher, but the actual word she uses is more intimate. Rabboni was warmer, more affectionate, a form a student might use for a beloved master. It is what comes out of her mouth when language has to function before her mind has caught up, and she reaches for him. The text does not explicitly describe the embrace, but it is the reason for what he says next. The Greek imperative requires it. Stop clinging to me. The clinging is already happening. He is telling her to release a grip he is currently inside. This is where the second chapter has to pause. The morning has carried Mary through darkness, through a sprint to the city, through a return to an empty tomb, through a conversation with angels she barely registered, through the strange unfamiliarity of the man behind her, through the sound of her own name. She has run a long way in a short time, and now her hands are wrapped around the only thing that ever truly mattered to her, and he is asking her very gently to let go. Why? That is the question the next chapter has to answer. Not because there is no answer in what has already been said. The answer is there, in the verb, in the morning, in the garden, in the name, but it has to be drawn out carefully because what he asks of her is going to become, in time, what he asks of every reader who has ever loved something they could not keep. Chapter 3, the gardener who called her name. She thought he was the gardener. Centuries of commentary have treated this as Mary's mistake, the kind of small embarrassment a careful narrator records to make a scene feel real. But there is another way to read it, and it has been there since the earliest centuries of the church. She was right, not about his job, about his identity. The man she was speaking to was, in the deepest possible sense, the gardener. He had walked with the first man and the first woman in the cool of the day. He had planted the original orchard. He had spoken creation into being out of an unformed dark. The earliest Christian writers, Origen in the 3rd century, Gregory of Nyssa in the 4th, picked this up and held it up to the light. Mary's confusion, they wrote, was not really confusion. It was a kind of accidental theology. The instinct that made her say gardener was nearer to the truth than the instinct of anyone who would later try to describe the resurrection in more theologically careful language. There is a Hebrew detail beneath this that often goes unmentioned. The word for garden in the opening chapters of Genesis is gan. The Hebrew imagination did not separate garden from sanctuary, the way later Western thought did. A garden was a sacred enclosure, a place where God walked, a place set apart from the wilderness outside. The temple in Jerusalem was understood, in some Jewish traditions, as a recreated garden. Its inner walls were carved with palm trees and pomegranates and open flowers. To stand in the temple was to stand, symbolically, back in Eden. And here in another walled garden beside a tomb cut into the rock, the man who has just come back from the dead is being recognized by a woman who calls him master. The geography is doing more than providing a setting. Now, the verb again, mehaptu, stop clinging. Why? The reason he gives is the strange one. I have not yet ascended to the Father. The Greek adverb is upo, not yet. It is one of the most theologically loaded small words in the New Testament. It implies that something is in motion, that a process is underway, that the resurrection is not a finished fact of this moment, but a stage in a larger movement. He is alive. He is also still on his way somewhere. That movement is what Mary's grip would interrupt. Read it slowly. He does not say, "Do not touch me because I am a ghost." Other gospel passages explicitly deny that interpretation. Luke records him eating fish, inviting his disciples to handle him, insisting he is not a spirit. He does not say, "Do not touch me," because women cannot touch a holy man. That reading has been imposed on the text by interpreters who came centuries later from cultures with very different rules about gender and ritual. And it does not fit what Jesus does in the rest of the Gospels, where he allows women to anoint his feet, hold his ankles, and weep against his shoulder. What he says is more subtle and more unsettling. He says, "I have not yet finished moving. Do not hold me here as if this is the end. There is more." The early theologians who took the letter to the Hebrews seriously read this in a priestly key. In the old temple system, the high priest entered the inner sanctuary on the Day of Atonement. carrying the blood of the sacrifice to make atonement for the people. Hebrews chapters 7 through 10 describe Jesus as the true high priest, entering not the earthly temple but the heavenly one, carrying not the blood of bulls but his own. To intercept that movement, to grab the high priest mid-stride between the altar and the holy place, would be to interrupt the sacred work itself. That is one reading, and it has weight. But it is not the only reading. The pastoral reading is gentler. The man who loved her is telling her that loving him from now on will look different. The hands she is using to hold him in place are the same hands that have, for years, carried oil and bread and provisions for his ministry. They are good hands. There is nothing wrong with the embrace, but the relationship is changing, and clinging to its old shape will keep her from receiving its new shape. Anyone who has ever lost someone and tried, against all evidence, to hold the relationship still in the form it used to have, understands what he is asking her to do. The love does not end. The form ends. The transition is painful, and there is no shortcut through it. Mary is being asked, in this single sentence, to grow up theologically in real time. She is being asked to release the body she had come to anoint and to receive instead a presence she cannot yet describe. She is the first human being to make this transition. Everyone who has ever sung a hymn or whispered a prayer to a Jesus they cannot see is, in some sense, walking a road she opened. And there is something she has to do next before any of the disciples have heard the news. He gives her a sentence to carry. "Go to my brothers and tell them, I am ascending to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God." Read that line carefully. There are two layers in it. The first is the pronouncement itself. The direction of the resurrection's motion is upward, toward the Father, and the relationship between Jesus and his disciples is being placed on new ground. They are now his brothers, not students, not servants. Brothers. The word would have stopped Mary in her tracks if she had paused long enough to hear it. Throughout the Gospels, Jesus has called them disciples, friends, little ones, occasionally sons. Brothers is new. Brothers means family. Brothers means a shared inheritance. Brothers means the relationship he had to the Father is now, somehow, being extended to them. The second layer is even stranger. My Father and your Father. My God and your God. He could have simply said our Father, our God, but he does not. The grammar holds the two sides apart, even while it brings them together. His sonship is one thing, theirs is another. They are being adopted into the same family, but he is not collapsing the difference between himself and them. The careful theology of later Christian creeds, fully God, fully one with the Father, but distinct from the disciples in his eternal nature, is already present in this small grammatical choice on a morning in a garden. She receives this message. She does not write it down. She does not ask for clarification. She does what she has done since the day he found her in Magdala. She goes. The ending of this scene happens almost too fast. Mary walks into wherever the disciples are gathered and says, "I have seen the Lord." 5 words in English, 4 in Greek. Hiereka ton kyrion. The verb is in the Greek perfect tense, which carries the meaning of an action that has happened and whose effects are still ongoing. Not, "I saw him." More like, "I have seen him, and the seeing is still happening inside me." That is the first creed of the Christian Church. It was spoken by a woman in someone's home in Jerusalem, before any letter was written, before any council met, before any building was dedicated, before any of the more famous proclamations made by the more famous apostles. "I have seen the Lord." The chapter could end there, but one detail still has to be named. She did this without him in front of her. She walked away from the garden alone. Whatever she felt in those first steps after letting go of the embrace, and the text gives us nothing of her interior in this moment, which may be the most respectful thing it could have done. She carried the message without the comfort of his physical presence. The transition he had asked her to make at the moment of the embrace, she was already living. He was not visible to her as she walked. She trusted him anyway. That is what he had asked her for. That is what the not yet of his ascending had required. and that is the shape of every act of Christian witness from that morning to this one. The seeing happens, the clinging gets way, the walking out happens without him beside the witness in any visible form, and then, somewhere along the road, the witness opens her mouth and the message becomes the next person's seeing. Chapter 4. What Jerome did to a single Greek word around the year 38-2 in a study somewhere in Rome. A brilliant and difficult scholar named Jerome was given an enormous job. Pope Damasus had asked him to clean up the Latin translations of the Bible that were circulating in the Western Church, which had multiplied into an inconsistent jumble. Jerome accepted. He spent the next 2 decades on the project, eventually producing the Latin translation that would come to be called the Vulgate, the version that would sit at the center of Western Christianity for the next 1200 years. When he reached John chapter 20 verse 17, he wrote 3 Latin words, "Noli me tangere," do not touch me. That choice was not careless. Jerome was one of the finest Greek and Hebrew scholars of his age. He knew the verb haptomai. He knew the present imperative. He had Origen and Greek-speaking commentators on his shelves. But Latin is not Greek, and the Latin verb tangere does not carry the same range as haptomai. Tangere stretches from the gentlest brush to the firmest grip. Jerome had to choose, and he chose the broader, more general reading, a single word's worth of difference. And it changed everything about how the West remembered this scene. Within a few centuries, Noli me tangere had become a catchphrase. Medieval theologians wrote treatises on it. Painters painted it. By the High Middle Ages, the scene of Mary kneeling in a garden with her hand outstretched and Jesus stepping back, his palm raised in something between blessing and refusal, had become one of the most reproduced images in Western religious art. Fra Angelico painted it. Titian painted it. Holbein, Correggio, Bronzino, dozens of others. The pose became almost stylized, Jesus leaning gracefully away, Mary in red on her knees, sometimes a small gardener's hoe in his hand, as a quiet acknowledgement of her first impression. The painting tradition is breathtakingly beautiful and theologically misleading, because in every one of those paintings Jesus is pulling away. That is not what the Greek says. The Eastern Christian tradition, which kept reading the Bible in Greek, never quite developed the same iconography. In Eastern Orthodox icons of this scene, Mary is often pictured as already standing, already commissioned, already turning to leave. The moment captured is not the rebuke, it is the sending. The same passage produced 2 different visual cultures because it was read through 2 different languages. This is worth lingering on because it is one of the clearer examples of how translation can shape theology in ways that the original authors could not have foreseen. A Greek-speaking Christian in 5th century Antioch and a Latin-speaking Christian in 5th century Milan were reading the same gospel and forming different images in their minds of the same scene. The Greek reader heard the verb and pictured an embrace being released. The Latin reader heard the verb and pictured a touch being denied. Multiply that by 1,000 years and the differences accumulate. The Latin reading also did something subtle to how the figure of Mary was treated in Western devotion. If Jesus refuses her touch, the natural question becomes, why? And the answers that filled in over the centuries were not always kind to her. Some commentators suggested she was being rebuked for her past, a past that had been invented by the same conflation that turned her into the sinful woman of Luke 7. Others suggested she was being rebuked for her femaleness, that ritual purity required distance. Still others suggested she was being rebuked for the disorder of her affection, that her love was too earthly, too clinging, too physical. Each reading carried its own freight, and most of them put her in a worse light than the text actually does. The Greek reading does not require any of this. The Greek reading places her exactly where the morning's emotional logic places her, inside his arms, holding on for dear life because the dear life she thought she had lost is suddenly, impossibly, present again. The command to release is not a rebuke. It is a redirection. The grip has to loosen because she is going somewhere. There is a related point about the manuscript tradition itself. The earliest Greek manuscripts we have of John's Gospel, including a small fragment called Papyrus 52, dated to roughly the first half of the 2nd century, the oldest surviving piece of any New Testament text, confirm that the Greek of this passage has been remarkably stable. There is no significant textual variation in the verb. The scribes who copied John for the first 1,000 years of the church had no doubt about what the original said. The translation problem is a translation problem. It is not a problem of the underlying text. This matters because it means the misreading was not introduced by careless copying. It was introduced by careful translating. A scholar of Jerome's caliber, working in a Latin context where tandra was the obvious choice, made a decision that fit the language he was writing in. The decision was reasonable. It was also, in retrospect, costly. In the 20th century, biblical scholarship began to revisit the verb. Translations multiplied. The Revised Standard Version, published in the mid-20th century, kept the older, "Do not hold me." More recent translations have moved further. The New International Version has, "Do not hold on to me." The English Standard Version reads the same. The New Revised Standard Updated Edition prefers, "Do not hold on to me." Modern Catholic translations, including the New American Bible Revised Edition, have made similar moves. The phrase "nolimi tandra" still exists in art and music and liturgy, but the actual translations being read on Sunday mornings have, slowly and quietly, returned to the Greek. That recovery is part of a larger pattern. Over the last century, Western Christianity has been steadily working back through its inherited translations and asking, again and again, what the original languages actually said. Sometimes the differences are small. Sometimes they reshape entire devotional traditions. The recovery of Mary Magdalene's verb is an example of the second kind. There is one more layer to mention before this chapter closes: the Aramaic. Mary speaks to Jesus in Aramaic. She calls him Rabboni, not Rabbi. The longer form is more affectionate, more personal. Aramaic was the household language of 1st century Galilean Jews. They could read Hebrew in the synagogue, and they sometimes spoke Greek in the marketplace. But the language they grew up in, the language they argued and joked and grieved in, was Aramaic. When Mary's emotion overwhelms her Greek-trained narrator, what comes out of her mouth is Aramaic. John preserves the original word and translates it for his readers, a small bilingual gesture that opens a window onto how the actual conversation might have sounded. She speaks Aramaic. He speaks Aramaic back. Mariam, Rabboni. 2 words in their first language, exchanged in a garden at dawn, and then preserved by a Greek-speaking gospel writer who kept them untranslated because something would have been lost if he had smoothed them into Greek. Jerome, working in Latin 3 centuries later, did not have the same option for the verb. The cost of that single decision is not catastrophic. The story is still the story. Mary still meets her risen teacher. He still sends her out as the first witness. The empty tomb is still empty. But for 1,000 years and more, Western Christians read the scene with the wrong shape in their minds. They saw a refusal where the Greek showed a release. They imagined a stiff arm where the Greek implied an embrace being slowly opened. The difference is not doctrinal. It is human, and it took centuries of patient scholarship to begin to put it back. Chapter 5. The first voice to carry the news. She walked out of the garden alone. The text does not describe her steps. It does not record her thoughts. It does not tell us whether she ran or walked, whether she paused on the path, whether she passed other women coming the opposite way with their own spices and their own grief. It tells us, in a single Greek sentence, that she came and announced to the disciples, "I have seen the Lord," and these things he said to her. That is the first sermon. 4 words, in Greek. Hioraka, ton kyrion. The verb in the perfect tense, the kind of seeing that does not stop happening once it has happened. The first proclamation of the resurrection in human history was made by a woman in a private home in Jerusalem to a small group of frightened men. It was made before any letter was written. It was made before any apostle had crossed the Mediterranean. It was made before the word Christian existed in any language. It was made before Peter preached at Pentecost, before Paul met the risen Jesus on the Damascus Road, before any council debated any creed. All of those things came after. This came first. The early church remembered this. Hippolytus of Rome, writing in the early 3rd century, called Mary the Apostola Apostolorum, the apostle to the apostles. The phrase stuck. Thomas Aquinas, 1,000 years later, used the same title. The medieval church marked her feast day, July 22nd, with full liturgical honors. The Eastern Church goes further, calling her Eis Apostolos, equal to the apostles. The title is not honorary, it is structural. An apostle, in the original Greek sense, is one who is sent. She was sent. She was sent. She went. The function fits. There is something almost shocking about the fact that the first preacher of the resurrection was someone whose testimony, under Jewish legal practice of the time, would not have been accepted as evidence in court. Women's witness was generally considered less reliable in formal Jewish legal contexts of the 1st century. The historian Josephus says as much in his Antiquities. The fact that all 4 Gospels insist that women, and in John's case, one specific woman, were the first witnesses to the empty tomb is one of the strongest historical arguments for the authenticity of the resurrection accounts. If you were inventing a story to convince 1st century Jewish readers, you would not have your first witness be a woman. You would have Peter find the tomb. You would have a centurion stumble into the garden. You would choose a witness whose testimony carried legal weight. The Gospel writers chose Mary. The most plausible explanation for that choice is that they chose her because that is what actually happened, and they were not willing to edit her out. So she went, she told. The disciples did not believe her at first. Luke's parallel account says her words seemed to them like an idle tale. The Greek word lyrisrei, meaning nonsense or foolishness. Even the men who had walked with Jesus for 3 years did not initially trust her, but she had not been sent to be believed. She had been sent to speak, and she spoke. The line she carried did its work eventually. By that same evening, Jesus had appeared to the disciples behind locked doors. By the following week, he had appeared to Thomas and offered the wounds. By 40 days later, the public ascension had occurred, and the small group was praying in an upper room waiting for what came next. None of those later moments would have happened if Mary had not walked out of the garden first. She is the hinge. There is a quiet pattern in all of this that is worth naming. In the New Testament, Jesus often entrusts the most important first words to the people who would have been least expected to carry them. The first announcement of his birth went to shepherds, men whose work made them ritually unclean for parts of the year and whose social standing was low. The first announcement of his messiahship to a non-Jewish village went to a Samaritan woman with a complicated marital history. The first announcement of his resurrection went to a woman from Magdala who had been bound by 7 demons before he found her. The pattern is consistent. The most important sentences in the Gospel are placed in the mouths of people the surrounding culture had reasons to dismiss. The placement is deliberate. It says something about how the Gospel itself moves. Now, back to the verb that began this whole story. Mihaptu, stop clinging. The verb is the reason she could go. If she had been allowed to keep her grip, the embrace would have become her resting place. She would have stayed in the garden. She would have wanted, more than anything, to keep him exactly as he was in that moment. A body she could hold, a face she could see, a voice she could hear without effort. He told her to release that, not because the embrace was wrong, because the embrace was not the destination. Releasing it was the only way to receive what came next. That is the spiritual logic underneath the verb, and it is the reason this single morning in a small garden outside Jerusalem has been read and reread for 2,000 years. Every reader who has ever held something they could not keep, a person, a season, a version of themselves, a dream of how their life was supposed to go, meets this verb and feels it. The release is not the loss. The release is the condition under which something larger can be received. Mary's hands had to open before her voice could carry the message. The two were connected at a level deeper than narrative. There is an old line, attributed in different forms to different church fathers and modern writers, that says faith is mostly the practice of letting go and finding that what you let go of is still there in a way you could not have imagined. The line is not in the Gospel, but the morning is. A few small details before this draws to a close. The garden where it has happened is, with reasonable historical probability, located beneath the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in the Old City of Jerusalem. The site has been venerated since at least the early 4th century, when the Emperor Constantine's mother Helena identified it during her pilgrimage. Modern archaeology has confirmed that the location was a quarry in the 1st century, with rock-cut tombs in its walls, and that it was outside the city walls at the time of the crucifixion. The geography is plausible, the exact tomb is unknowable, but somewhere very close to where modern pilgrims now line up to enter a small marble shrine. A woman from Galilee once stood weeping at dawn, and a voice she did not recognize said her name. The other location associated with her, Magdala on the Sea of Galilee, was excavated extensively beginning in 2009. Archaeologists uncovered a 1st century synagogue, a marketplace, ritual baths, and a striking carved stone that appears to depict a menorah, one of the earliest such representations ever found. The town she came from has been recovered, in part from the dirt. Walking through that excavation today gives a small sense of the world she left when she chose to follow him. It was not a poor village. She walked away from a real life. She never appears in the New Testament narrative again after the resurrection morning. Acts does not name her in the Pentecost crowd, though women are mentioned generally. Paul does not name her in his letters. The early traditions about her later life are mostly legendary. Some Eastern traditions place her in Ephesus, where she is said to have died and been buried. Some Western traditions, formed many centuries later, place her in southern France. The historical evidence for either tradition is thin. What the text does tell us is what she did on the morning that mattered most. The rest was lived without recording. That seems right. A woman who had been told to stop clinging would not be the kind of woman who needed her later years preserved in monuments. She had carried the sentence she had been given. She had passed the message into the next pair of hands. The work she had been sent for was done. Whatever came afterwards, including the long quiet years that the Bible does not narrate, she lived as the first person who had learned how to follow him without holding him. If the message of this morning has anything to say to a listener now, 2,000 years later, it is probably something like this. The hands that have closed too tightly around something good can be opened. The opening is not the end of the relationship, it is the beginning of a different one. The voice that called her by name in the garden is the same voice that has been calling other names ever since. In other gardens, at other dawns, in other seasons of grief that look, from the inside, like darkness with no morning attached. She walked out into Jerusalem with her hands empty and her message full. That is the picture the chapter wants to leave behind, not the embrace, beautiful as it was, not the rebuke, which was never really a rebuke. The walk, the empty hands, the full mouth, the first voice carrying the first sentence of a faith that would go on speaking in every language humans have ever spoken, for 2,000 years and counting. Stop clinging to me. Go and tell my brothers. She did both.